One of my favorite memes when it comes to discipleship shows Jesus standing in front of his disciples, and they're all sitting on desks like in a school, and he has a PowerPoint in front of him. And the meme says, Jesus didn't disciple this way. Why do we?
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Story Church Project. Welcome. Marcos, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, bro. I'm doing good. I am currently in a tent in the southwest of Australia. And I've been here for, I think, 2 weeks now. Close to 2 weeks. It's going awesome.
Bro, so, I mean, by the way, today's episode is it's going to be fire, man. There's so much to talk about, and we appreciate everyone just kind of waiting in this ongoing conversation. Thank you guys for that little break. But I talked about last episode about you being on a little break. So you're not necessarily on a camping trip, are you, bro? Let us know, bro. Because what's up, man? What is that 2 week already in a tent?
No, I'm not on a camping trip, man. This is where I live now. This is where I live. I just decided, my family and I decided that the gypsy life is for us. So we have embraced that. We got out of our rental and we decided this is how we're going to live for the rest of time. I'm just kidding. Not
Let's
the rest
go.
of time. So the long story short, we're planning on moving back to the States, and my wife has had to reactivate her permanent residency, which she used to have, but she's been gone for 10 years now. So it's been a while. So we're reactivating that. And there's a process. It can take about 6 to 8 months for you to be invited in for your interview, and they can, properly sort of activate it. And so, our rental was pretty much coming to an end. And so we said, rather than renewing the rent, and for those of you not in Australia right now, rent prices are astronomical. Like our house went from $430 a week to $720 a week. It was insane. So we're like, look, rather than renew the rent, let's go on an adventure. We've been in Australia for 10 years. We still haven't had an adventure here. We still haven't seen so much of it. So let's go on an adventure. And we didn't have a lot of cash flow, so we could go get ourselves a nice, fancy camper van or anything. But we bought a really nice tent and all the gear that we need, and we've just been on the road now for 2 weeks, and we're just jumping from beach to beach, bro. That's literally that's literally what we're doing, bro. Like we stay
by
at
the
the beach
beach
for a few days. Yeah, oh yeah, it's literally just I could walk there in a minute. Yeah, it's just down this way. So we stay at a beach for a few days, and then we pack up, we move to another one, then we pack up, move to another one, and thankfully I got Starlink internet so that I can still do things like this. Although it is a little bit hard. That's why we had that break, because there is a learning curve, and there is a lot of unpredictability when you're living like this. And so, even this week, we had to change our time that we were having this conversation twice, because just different things, like Monday night, something popped up. And then the Tuesday one, it was like, oh, wait a minute, because we were going to do it on my evening. And then I'm sitting here in the tent and I'm like, wow, it's really dark. I don't think I thought this through.
Yeah, bro.
You guys are just going to see my teeth and that's it, So,
Dude.
So now, so we adjusted again. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that out on the road. But it's incredible. It has its challenges, but it also has its really, really cool parts. So yeah, man, that's the long story short. And
when you guys do leave, bro, you're gonna leave with a bang,
sorry.
man. You guys are leaving with a bang after. So that's pretty sick, man. Anyway, but people can keep up, by the way, with the with your story and updates, because you guys are doing that on you're doing that on our Facebook page. So anyway, if you guys haven't liked the Facebook page, go to the Story Church Project at the Facebook account, and you guys, you'll see pics here and there. Marcos posting their adventure with their family. I think that's pretty cool, man. We're gonna have to do some type of probably episode or something on that sometime, man, because that's crazy stuff. That's kind of wild.
I wish I had your video skills, because I would be making some sick videos right now. But I'm a writer. I have like zero video skills. So,
bro, just put your phone, bro. You have more footage than we ever have.
This is true.
Yeah, bro. Well, good stuff, man. So, yeah, man. Let's tell us a little bit what we're gonna be talking about. This conversation we've been meaning to kind of close it during the season, we're talking about the why youth are leaving. And again,
Yes.
thank you guys for subscribing. Thank you guys for joining the conversation. But overall, we've been saying that it's a much deeper issue, right? It's not just about, you know, a program here and there. So we're talking about the framework. But bro, tell us what are we gonna be looking at today?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, before I tell you guys what we're looking at today, some exciting news. I don't know if those of you who are listening are familiar with Younger Generation Church. But Younger Generation Church is a church based out in Texas that is literally what it sounds like. They have a really, really powerful youth ministry, really powerful engagement with their young people. And I think the amazing thing about it is that Younger Generation Church is a conventional model of church. And we talk a lot about the missional model of church, and I certainly do. I've written books on it. I've got online school where I teach people how to do it, all these things. And the missional model of church for me is really, really essential. But I'm also pragmatic enough to recognize that not everybody can just flip to that. You know, some people can, and if you're in a context where you can go missional model, please do. It's incredible, and I've got all the tools for you on the website. But I recognize that it's not always feasible for everyone, and so I'm always looking for opportunities to say, okay, what's a halfway sort of meet point, and looking for conventional churches that are doing the conventional thing really well. So what I did was I reached out to Younger Generation Church, to specifically to their pastor, Alan Martin, Alan Martin. Really, really incredible guy. It just absolutely amazing human being. And we were able to have a sit down and an interview, and I just asked him questions about Younger Generation Church, asking him, what are you guys doing different? How are you guys empowering your youth? How are you engaging them? How are you building these amazing relationships? What are you doing in your conventional context that other churches can also do in their conventional context? And that is an amazing interview, and we're going to be posting that one. It might be next week, Mario, because we're going to be moving again next week, so we might post that interview next week,
Perfect, man.
just to give us a little bit of space to settle in before we do our final episode for the season. But please check that out, guys. Alan Martin, Younger Generation Church interview dropping next week. You're absolutely going to love it. Now, what we're talking about today we've been talking about that frame, the youth ministry frame, and really challenging the idea or the assumption that, hey, our youth are leaving. What are we going to do? Let's make another program. Let's create another event. Let's put together another youth rally or another youth camp. And I've been in church, all my life. Like, that's literally all we ever do. When we have a youth retention problem, we just think of a new program. We think of a new rally. We think of a new retreat. We invite a new speaker. We spend money on aesthetics and all these things. And again, not against any of that stuff. I think it's great. I think, there's nothing worse than, a youth gathering that has terrible aesthetics and, it's obvious nobody put any effort into it. You want it to be nice, but that's not what's going to make the difference. And we know it because we see the statistics. Like, we've been getting better and better at the programs and how they are run and the overhead and the structure and all. We've been getting so good at it over the last 20 to 30 years. And yet the youth retention doesn't really seem to be changing. It's still bleeding like a perforated artery. And so what we've been looking at in this season is there's got to be something deeper that's going on that a program can't fix, and that's the frame, how we frame youth ministry. And in our modern context, particularly in the West, I don't know about other parts of the world because I'm not there, but particularly in the West, in our modern context, that frame has 4 parts. And we looked at 2 of them. We looked at spectatorship and consumerism. And this is a model of church that is essentially built for young people to just come and consume, just come and sit, right? There's no price to pay. There's no demand. There's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no meaning, right? And when I say price to pay, when I say demand, I'm not talking about in a legalistic, ultra-conservative sense. I'm talking about like relationally and kingdom-centered. Like, we're just showing up to a program to hear somebody talk, to sing some songs, and that's kind of it. Like, there's not much more to it than that. And this is the consumeristic spectator frame of youth ministry. And even when we do service, right? Even when we do service is a thing on a calendar. It's like, oh, our service day is coming up. Bring your friends. We're gonna go feed the homeless. It's like it's a thing on a calendar at specific points of the year. It's not a way of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the other two, and we've talked about those already in the previous episode, so I will say no more. But the other two sides of that frame are outsourcing and rationalism. That's what we're going to talk about today. Outsourcing is the modern tendency to outsource the discipleship of our kids to a professional, right? And so rather than discipleship being seen as primarily a familial or family experience, we outsource it to the kids pastor, we outsource it to the kids leadership volunteer, we outsource it to the youth department. And so that's outsourcing. And then rationalism is the last one that we're going to talk about, and this is particularly true in Adventist churches, not 100% of the time, but most of the time. And that is where we think that discipleship is just about teaching information. Oh, so long as our kids understand the 28 fundamental beliefs, so long as we do Bible studies with them, so long as they hear these sermons, and so long as if I ask them a question, they know how to quote the Bible verse and where it's found. That's the church I grew up in, right? There was a lot of pressure, like you got to know where the verse is found, and we think that that's discipleship. And that's a rationalistic approach to discipleship, where discipleship, rather than being a whole person experience, is really just about how good you are at retaining information and data that you are being indoctrinated with. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work, man. Anyways, that's what we're going to talk about today, one after the other.
Yeah, man. This is good. And in the book, we pose a question. You pose a question, man, and it's one that. I mean, I've actually asked my elders this too, which is nuts. But why do we keep going to the same thing over and over? Like, why do? And it's a good question, right? Because it seems. And last week I talked this we talked about it in the 2 episodes ago, but I talked about it also in this last episode. If we already have the framework, right? We have the framework. So the framework is going to show us what success looks like. And so we think success is the connection that a young person has to the institution. That can look in a way of, being present at an event, being present maybe in doing something, like you involve them to give a scripture reading or something. Sometimes we say, we do stuff like that. And so we equate that as, hey, it's working, it's successful. But why do we keep coming back, even as parents? And this is a question that comes down to the parents, to be honest. We're talking about youth. It matters how you're brought up, right? Why do parents keep going back to it? And I thought that's a great question. Why do we keep coming back to the same framework if, like you said, it only has a 40% success rate? But I think, and like you mentioned in the book, we're going to continue going down that framework because we think that's the success. Like that's how we frame success. So even if success is 10%, we'll say, well, we'll continue doing it because that's how it has to look like. That's how it has to be. So that's when we've, sacrificed true intentionality and spirituality and intentionality at the feet of mediocrity because, we'll say, well, 5 people came, so, it was good. But wait a minute, we keep grabbing ourselves from that type from those type of comments and mentality because we think that is how it's supposed to look like. So, bro, what you mentioned, expand on that a little bit on the question. Why do we keep going back to that, even as parents?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think one of the reasons why we keep going back to it is because we're familiar with it. And even though it doesn't work, and we see the statistics that it doesn't work, there's a sense of guilt of pulling your kids out of that. Now, when I say pulling your kids out of it, like even in our missional network, I still encourage families. If there's a local church that has a Pathfinder program, sign them up. If the local youth department is doing an event or camp, send your kids. Like, this isn't about being isolationist, But what we're doing in a missional context is we're removing ourselves from a model that predominantly frames youth ministry in this frame that we're talking about. And that is really hard for people. And it's hard because you're pulling your kid out of this thing that you're familiar with. You're pulling your kid out of the thing that all the other kids are still in, and there's a sense of guilt. Like, what if I'm failing? What if I screw up my kid's spiritual life? And I've had this conversation with many parents over the years of doing missional community who struggle with this. Like, what if I'm hurting my kids' spirituality? What if I'm hurting their
Hmm.
chances of being, a follower of Jesus because I've pulled them out of this conventional model?
Hmm.
And one of the things I often say to them is, look, we know that that model doesn't work. So when we put our kids in it, we don't put our kids in it because it's what's best for their spiritual life. We put our kids in it because it's what's best for our conscience,
Hmm.
right? It appeases our conscience. It makes us feel like, well, at least I did the baseline that everybody expects. And if my kid
Hmm.
walks away from God, well, what can I do? You know?
Hmm.
Um, and so ultimately, it's not, if you're really, really honest, it's not really about our kids. It's just about us and our feelings of guilt around trying something different. If it was really about our kids, if it was really about our kids, bro, we would be raising an alarm at this 40% youth retention success rate. We
Hmm.
would not be settling for that. We would be
Hmm.
clamoring and hollering for an answer if it was really about our kids. But a lot of times, and this goes for me as well, right? I'm not being judgmental here. I experienced this as well. A lot of times it's about appeasing my guilt or satisfying the sense that I did what I had to do as a parent, as a believing parent, right? And so let the chips fall where they may. I took my kids to the program. I took my kids to the event. I did the things that everybody else does that was expected, and I hope they stay in church. And it's like, look, the statistics tell us that highly likely they won't,
Hmm.
but we just keep doing it because it's familiar, and it's difficult to do something new because you don't know how it's going to work. you know you don't
Yeah.
know if a missional approach is actually going to be better. You have no idea. And so this is why someone at some point has to take that risk and say, look, what what I know for sure, I don't know what will work, but what I know for sure is what doesn't work.
Hmm. Hmm.
So let's take a step forward now. But here's the thing, and this is one of the things I wanted to poke at as we talk about outsourcing. When I say we someone needs to take the risk, I don't mean immature risk, right? I
Hmm.
don't mean
Hmm.
a risk without thought. I mean a calculated and intelligent risk, because the data, the research has given us enough to know, okay, we know what doesn't work. We don't fully know what will work yet, but we have enough data that points us in the right direction. And I'll share some of that data a little bit later on. But yeah, hopefully that, I don't know if that answered the question or not. Let me know what you think.
No, no, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does, bro. I want to add to that. That actually, I grew up at least in the Hispanic world, and you might attest to this too. The reason why some parents have made these decisions to just continue putting the kids in the program, right? Sabbath school, children's Sabbath school, Pathfinders Venture, all that stuff. I would hear leaders guilt trip about that. And it goes back to
Mm,
being the same framework. So the leaders of the church, and I say this as a leader now, because at a moment I would fall into that, right? My earlier years of ministry, it and even though I was like, wait a minute, but this stuff ain't working, right? But we would say things like, you don't want to put them in Pathfinder ministry, they're gonna get out of the church, right? Every time you would call for that. Oh, if they're not in,
yep.
bring them to the Sabbath school class. It's game over for their future. So again, we're not advocating to get rid of the programs. We're just saying to say that that is the framework in order to get youth at the level of spirituality that God wants them to be. It's not it.
Mm.
It's not working. It hasn't worked. And to guilt trip the parents to say if you don't do this, your child is gonna get out of. So yes, you're right. It's a combination of, you know what, this is easy, right? I just have to bring them there. I just have to drop them off. Bro, we started adventures at my church building, right? And it was great. But I've heard of this from other churches where now adventures requires the parents to come because it's a family oriented ministry, and people are pushing to that. Like, come the parents. Well, some parents were mad because they weren't able to just drop off the kids and leave. And it's like the stuff that is happening now, and not all adventures. Obviously, a lot of people are still just doing, the whole army little stuff, which is fine, no judgment. But those who are trying to make it more family oriented, like this is we want you to connect with your child. We want you, like, the spirituality isn't going to happen here only. Some parents were like, nah, like, I thought I'm just supposed to drop them off and, like, you do the work. And it kind of goes to the outsourcing, what you're talking about here, to that element of outsourcing where, here's my child, I hope you guys do a good job, right? Yeah. And when they don't, and when it doesn't work, because it doesn't work most of the time, at least,
Yeah.
that's the scapegoat. The church is the scapegoat, right? Like, oh, we blame the church. So I think it's a combination of that leadership also saying, hey, the guilt trip, if you don't put them in this, if you don't put them through this framework of what it means to be a Christian, then they're going to leave. And ironically, it doesn't work most of the time, but we continue to do it.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. It's very true, bro. And it's tough because parenting is hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of times, a parent just wants a break. You know what I mean? Like, and I relate because I'm a parent, and like a lot of times, especially when your kids are little, you just want to take them somewhere, drop them off, and go catch your breath for a couple of hours. And so I think anytime that opportunity is there, a parent's going to be like, oh yes, finally get a little bit of a break, let's drop them off, and blah blah blah, go have a little bit of a break, catch our breath. That's normal. I think that's I mean, I say that's normal in our Western individualistic context because oftentimes parents raise their kids to a large degree on their own. They might have a bit of help here and there, but it's not like the village culture of tribal people who, like, the whole village is raising the kid. Like, you're kind of really primarily on it, so it's very exhausting. So I can really relate to that and be really sensitive to that. The difficulty, as you've mentioned, is that we treat discipleship almost entirely like this. We treat discipleship as an outsource where it's like, there's the youth volunteer, there's the youth department director, there's the youth pastor. They'll do it. They'll do that job. And check this out, bro. This is in the ebook that we've encouraged everyone to download. You can get it to storychurchproject.com/freebie. It's a free little ebook you can download on why young people are still leaving church. And here's what it says, right? Of the kids that stayed, this is one of the research projects that was done on kids who've actually never left church. And of the kids that stayed, here are five of the main reasons that contributed to their retention. Number one, they had dinner 5 of 7 nights a week as a family. Number two, they served with their families in a ministry. Number three, they had one spiritual experience with their family in their home every week. Number four, they were entrusted with responsibility in ministry at an early age. And I'm talking meaningful stuff, not just collecting money off an offering plate, right? And number five, they had at least one faith-focused adult in their lives other than their parents. Okay? So these are the 5 keys that were really instrumental in a young person not just staying in church, but being actively engaged in what God is doing in the world, right? Dinner 5 of 7 nights a week with the family, serve with their family in a ministry, have at least one spiritual experience with their family in their home every week, entrusted with responsibility in ministry at an early age, meaningful responsibility, and had at least one faith-focused adult, like a mentor or someone that they looked up to, outside of their immediate family. These are the things that really, really, really made a difference in terms of youth retention, according to this study. And there's some others that I'll look at in a minute. None of that has anything to do with the program. None of that has anything to do with a fancy band and a cool pastor with tattoos. Like none of all the stuff that we think, oh, like if we just do this stuff, the young people will stay. Like, and what's crazy is none of this stuff costs money. Like having dinner with your family. Serving. I mean, I suppose food's a little expensive, but you got to eat anyway, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't cost money in the sense that it's not a fancy or complex program. that you're putting together, and trusting your young people with ministry responsibility, having at least one faith-focused adult in your life, like other than your family, so like a friend, a mentor. None of this stuff. There's no subscription fee for this stuff, like it's just natural human, connection and relationship. And this was one of the studies that you can read about in the ebook. Um, and notice this. I thought this was amazing. This is from a study called Soul Searching: The Religious and Spiritual Lives of Teenagers. And this is what they say. And this is mind blowing, by the way. I want you to remember how in the last episode we talked about 40% success rate in youth ministry, which is equivalent to 60% failure. That's what we're talking about, right? 60% failure is huge. Now, check this out. Of the parents who reported that their faith is extremely important in their daily lives, 60% of their teens report that faith is extremely or very important in their daily lives. Now, I want you to capture what just happened there, because this is mind-blowing. With family involvement at the center, youth retention goes from 40% to nearly 70% success. It's literally the opposite, bro. So conventional youth ministry success is 60% failure. With family involvement at the center, it's actually 70% success. It like flips it upside down, which is why I was saying earlier, like, we don't have to take uncalculated risk. We know from the data as well that there are some really clear markers on the direction we need to be headed in. Now, there's another two books that are sort of legendary in the youth ministry space: Growing Young and Sticky Faith are both really good. So those of you who are listening, if you want more youth ministry resources, please get your hands on Growing Young, get your hands on Sticky Faith. Amazing books. And both of them pretty much reach similar conclusions. And Growing Young identified 6 keys that keep youth in church. And guess what? None of them had anything to do with programs or events. So what Growing Young did, this is from Fuller Youth Institute, they basically did a massive research project with churches of all denominations all around the place. It didn't matter what denomination they were, and it didn't matter how much budget they had. And they didn't have to be liberal either. Some of them were liberal, some of them were conservative. Beside the point. Their only focus was, where are the churches where young people are still actively involved and passionate about the kingdom, right? Not just sitting on a chair, but actively involved and passionate about the kingdom. We want to know why those young people are still there. So rather than asking why are they leaving, they were asking why they're staying. And from that massive research project, they came up with 6 keys. And this is what I'm saying. None of these have anything to do with programs. None of them have anything to do with events. And newsflash, none of them had anything to do with worship styles. Now, a few seasons ago, Maxwell Aka and I did a whole series called Deconstructing the Adventist Worship Wars, where we talked about, worship styles and the reasons why we reject the conservative hymns-only approach. And I stand by all that. But what I want to clarify here is that is a valid conversation in its own space. But to pretend that is the key to retaining your youth is not true, right? And this is what Growing Young found. And here are the things that they found, the 6 keys that can be summarized. The first one is empower young people to lead. The second one is empathize with young people. The third one, explore Jesus together. The fourth one, cultivate a warm community. The fifth one, prioritize youth and their families. And the final one, number 6, serve your neighbors. Those are the 6 keys, bro. No programs, no events, no fancy bands, no international speakers. All of these keys, all 6 of them, you could summarize in one word, and it's relationships. It's relationships. And when you look at the research done by Sticky Church, it's pretty much the same stuff, man. Identifying the influence of the family, authentic relationships, faith integration into everyday life, as opposed to a program at a church that you outsource to, faith engagement, faith empowerment, all of them rooted in relationships. This is the key. This is the key, bro. And you know what's crazy? I don't know about America, but here in Australia, the the Australian Union did a massive project with the natural church development. I don't know if you've heard of natural church development. Is natural church development a thing in America? People do it?
Probably,
Have
bro.
you heard of it?
I haven't heard of it.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. So, natural church development, you can look it up, you can Google it. Um, NCD is usually what it's called. It's basically a resource, it's a tool, and it starts off with a questionnaire that you do with your church. And it asks all these questions about your church, its structure, its culture, its leadership, all these things. And what natural church development aims to do is it says, look, a healthy plant grows by itself. You don't have to tell it to grow. And a healthy church doesn't have to be told to grow. It will grow. So let's identify how healthy your church is. And we can then identify where is the health not doing so well. Let's focus on that. Let's heal that. And then when you focus on those keys of health of a healthy church, the growth takes care by itself, right? So they have these, I think it's 6 or 7 keys as well that you're analyzing through these questionnaires. Anyways, the Australian Union did it the whole union wide, like almost every church. There were a few churches who were like, NCD's not Adventist, we're not doing it. But forget those people, right? Like most of them did it. Okay. And you always have some wonky ones, right? So
Yeah.
all the way across Australia, the churches did it. And NCD has these different keys. It's like, how's your health in all these different areas. One of the keys, one of the areas is the one that the union scored in the lowest overall. It means that the vast majority of our local churches, when they did their survey, this came up dead last over and over and over and over again, all across Australia, all across our churches. Would you like to know what that key was?
Say it, bro.
I don't think I should say it, bro. I don't think I should say it, man.
Drum roll.
Let's go. The key that repeatedly came up last across all the local churches, which came up then ultimately came up dead last for the union as a whole, was loving relationships. That's where Adventism scored the lowest across the board. Loving relationships. And I worked in several churches that did this report. And when we did the quiz, we scored dead last, loving relationships. So, you look at the statistics that say relationships are the key, and then you look at Adventism and it's like relationships are where we suck the most. I think we know what direction we need to be headed in here. We may not fully know what it all looks like, but I think it's clear if we move in a relational direction where we're deconstructing the way we do church and rebuilding it in a way that centers people and relationships, we're going to be headed in a good direction here. And a big part of that, those relationships, coming back to the youth ministry conversation, is no longer outsourcing youth ministry, but allowing it to be an integrated, interconnected, intergenerational, relational experience. Anyways, let me stop, bro. I'm about to go into a TED talk over here.
No, bro.
Stop.
That's. I mean, it's about that. I mean, we're already a few minutes in, but so we outsource. That's one of the other part of the framework, and then the other one is rationalism, which I think are tied together also, because. So this is what I believe, bro. That relationship thing is key, right? It's like you said it's Jesus didn't teach with a PowerPoint presentation. That's not how it happened. It was through relationship. But what I've seen, I've been going to a few churches here and there and giving not training, but like leading out spiritual retreats for elders. And this was happening in my churches. This started with me. Like I started at my churches. So, some homies and other ones said, hey, let's do it. So I started doing it. And one thing that I noticed, bro, is the church doesn't know how to relate with Jesus himself. We don't have a relationship with Jesus. We have the information about Jesus. We we've equated spirituality with the cognitive notion of Jesus, right? So if you know it, you're spiritual. If you have the knowledge, you're spiritual. And so it's only normal that we would pass this idea down to our next generation and the following generations. Just if I teach it to you, if you acquire it, if you know it, if you're convinced by it, then then you're spiritual because you know the truth. So the truth has become just something that you have instead of something you've experienced.
That's right.
Now,
There you go.
I'm not anything about relative truth, right? I believe there's truth. There's truth, and Jesus said, I am the truth. So the way there's objectivity to this, but in that objectivity, in that truth, it's not there just for us to have it in our brain and at the cognitive level. It's there to be experienced. And what are we teaching our next generation if we ourselves don't know what it means to be in the presence of God? Because we can learn. Let's say we do have relationships with our younger people, like we establish good relationships. But there's a lot of like there's good nonprofits out there, bro, that do good relationship stuff too, right? And there's good nonprofits out that probably are better than us, have resources, and they're really good at it though. Like genuinely from their heart, they'll establish relationship. But we as a church, we relate to each other. Our relationships should be a result of the relationship, right? And that's a relationship with the supernatural. And again, in the book Spiritual Formation in a Secular World, this bro Andrew Root saying like we aren't teaching our next generations how to have that experience with the supernatural, right? It's all about the event. And it starts at the family level, bro. And I understand this is not easy, but I've noticed in churches, like, bro, when do our kids ever catch us? Like, do your children catch you reading the Bible, doing devotional? Do they catch you praying? Do they catch you, digging into the Word? Not for you to fight, the Jehovah Witness, but do they catch you in the Word, like just taking in the presence of God? Do you do that with your family? You said here the family, and by the way, in both books, the Fuller one, Growing Young, it talks about explore Jesus together. That's that's part of the spirituality one. And then the first study that you mentioned, the 5 reasons where young people were there, is they had a spiritual experience with their family in their home every week. How many spiritual experiences are happening in general? Like just us, bro. How many spiritual experiences are happening in pastors' lives? Because we've equated, and like you said, this is true, right? And one thing that I talk to when I go to the elders and we talk about spirituality, I say, and this was me, I read this in some book, man. I forget, but it's not mine. But it's not the same to do for God than to being with God, right? We've equated it to be the same thing. If you're doing for God, if you're doing for Christ, then that means you're being. Like you're spiritual, and it's not. They're two different things. You do because you're in His presence, because you're being one with Him. But that relationship element is so key, and I feel it needs to start with us relating to God, right? Like how are we teaching our children to literally love the presence of God, right? We use God as a tool only. Paul David Tripp says in his book, when it comes to prayer, just how prayer is supposed to be very spiritual. Prayer is supposed to be key in our families and our Christian life. It's required, not because we have to do it, but it's just part of being a Christian. But prayer, we teach our kids that prayer is just asking God for favors, right? And he says we teach them, hey God, I need this. Pray to God for your exam. Pray for God for your, for you to have this job. Pray for God for this. But he says, have we taught them to pray so that they can come and enjoy and worship in the presence of God through prayer? Like, is that even a thing?
Yeah.
And I feel that it isn't, bro. And that's where that relationship. And then how do we relate with each other? How do we relate with each other if we think that, well, if I know about the Bible, That's what being spiritual is, right? That's what I'm gonna pass down, and if that's enough, then yes, relationships don't end up mattering that much. So
Mm,
there's a huge disconnect there, bro, and I think it's something we need to. It's deeper than just, like you said. It's not just about program or event. Like, man, this is root stuff.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, bro. And there's a lot of things there. There's a lot of you said a lot of really good things there, man. I'm trying to pick one to react to because here's the thing. I'll put it this way. When I was doing missional training, I did some training with We Are Church, which is a missional movement that was started by Francis Chan in California.
Mm.
They're not Adventists, um, but they're just absolutely incredible people. And something happened on the first meeting that really blew my mind. Um, the meeting was going to be 2 hours long, a training session for missional church planting. And they said we're going to start off with prayer and then we'll get into the training. So my Adventist head is thinking probably going to be like a 5 minute prayer session and then boom, content, 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 content. Because that's how we
Yes,
would do
sir.
it, right? We're going to
Yes.
start off with a little prayer and then we'll spend the next hour and 45 minutes with all the training stuff.
Straight up Adventist. Yep.
Yep. I log on to this meeting because it was online. I log on to this meeting and the main guy's like, all right, guys, let's start off just like worshiping Jesus. Let's just be in awe of Jesus. And like even right there on the screen, you know, you could see the love for Jesus that this guy had. You know, he raises his hands right there on the screen. He looks up at heaven. He starts praying. He's worshiping Jesus. He's just blessing and honoring Jesus. And I'm like, oh, I love the way he prays. You know, like we don't usually pray like this as Adventists. We're very sort of flat and monotone. And I just really love the way he was connecting with Jesus. But in my head, I'm still thinking, in about 5 minutes, we're gonna get into the stuff. You know, we're gonna get into the content. Bro, this went on for a whole hour. The whole room on Zoom for a whole hour, just worshiping Jesus, man. And it wasn't until like it was a little bit over an hour. It wasn't until a few minutes past the hour that they were like, "Oh yeah, we were gonna do some training. Let's do some training, guys, before you log off." And I was like, "What just happened, bro?" It was amazing. It was amazing, right? And this is a perfect example of what you're talking about, the difference between being and doing. And one of my favorite memes that mentioned at the introduction is that it shows Jesus and his disciples. They're all sitting on desks like they're in a classroom, and he's got like a whiteboard or a PowerPoint in front of him, and he's teaching them. Teaching them with his
Hmm.
whiteboard, with his PowerPoint. And the meme says, "Jesus didn't disciple this way. Why do we?" And it's so true because how did Jesus disciple? Did Jesus communicate rational content? Yes.
Hmm. Of course, yes.
Is that all he did? Or
Mm.
is it even primarily what he did? No.
Mm.
How did Jesus disciple? This is how he discipled. When his disciples came to him, and I love it because this captures the discipleship model of Jesus so well. When the disciples, before they were even disciples, when they first approached him and they wanted to know about his life and about what he did, his response was very simple: come and see.
Hmm. Hmm.
Come and see. And for all the gospels, what is Jesus doing? He is sharing life with his disciples. They're walking together, they're talking together, they're doing dishes together, they're journeying together, um, they're cleaning together, they're living life together. This was discipleship. And in fact, the whole concept of the disciple in Jewish culture is that you, as the student of the rabbi, you follow the rabbi wherever he goes. A discipleship is an apprenticeship. It's not academic, it's not intellectual, it's an apprenticeship, it's hands on. You know, it's like nowadays, if you're going to be a carpenter, or you're going to be a bricklayer, or something of those sorts, you have to do an apprenticeship, right? Where you go and you work with someone who's been in that field for a long time, and hands on, you do the job. This is discipleship. Discipleship is not come sit on these chairs in our room that looks like a school room on Saturday morning at church, and I'm gonna hand out these little printouts and we're gonna read them and talk about them. That's not discipleship, man. That's academia. True
Mm,
discipleship
mm.
is life on life. That's what it is. It's life on life. The problem with life on life is that it will cost you something. Life on life doesn't come easy. It is not cheap. It will cost you something.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
Because you have to open up your hyper individualistic bubble and let people in.
Mm,
We don't want to do that in the West. We like our
mm,
hyper individualistic bubbles. We like our American dream of my house with
mm-hmm.
the fence around it and nobody gets in, right? This is my little domain. This is my mini
Mm-hmm.
empire. Everybody stay out, except for special occasions. We like that idea, and so I'll never forget. Lisa Clark Diller said this. She came here to Australia some years ago and spoke, and she said something I never forgot. There's rare moments where I've heard things in sermons that I've never forgotten, and this was one of them where she said, "Love will cost you something, always." And this is discipleship, man. It's love
Mm-hmm.
based, it's relational, it's going to cost you something. And what it's going to cost you is the convenience of just existing like nobody else exists, which
Mm,
is what the individualistic world offers us. But what it's going to offer you on the flip side is an intimacy and a connection and a belongingness and a togetherness that fills the soul, because it's how God designed us, right? And so this whole idea of discipleship being, oh, we're going to teach our kids the 28 fundamentals and we're going to, indoctrinate them with these 28 ideas. You might perhaps convince your young people that what you're saying is true, but to be convinced and to be converted are two very different
mm,
things.
mm,
And I'll end with this. In the documentary Sheep Among Wolves Volume 2, which I highly recommend, if you go on YouTube and you type in Sheep Among Wolves Volume 2, you won't regret it. Watch the whole thing. Um, but in that documentary, they're talking to the missional church in Iran, because Christianity is not legal in Iran. So the
mm,
missional church is underground there. And one of the disciples that they speak to said something that just stuck with me forever. He said, in the West, you convert to disciple, but in the East, he's speaking of Iran, we disciple to convert.
mm,
What did he mean by that? What he meant was, in the West, you put all this emphasis in all these programs and all these sort of like sales funnels to get people in, and then you convert them, and they join your church, and then you teach them how to follow Jesus.
mm, mm.
And we know what that model's like as Adventists, big evangelistic program, lots of flyers, a lot of people come up opening night. By closing night, there's like two left, you know, and maybe they get baptized, and maybe they get discipled. Most churches don't do discipleship in Adventism, but maybe they do, and we teach them how to follow Jesus after. In the East, they do the opposite, and this is what he meant. He said, in the East, we don't convert to disciple; we disciple to convert. What does that mean? It means the moment I meet someone, the moment I've made a connection with someone, discipleship begins then.
Mm.
They may not know it. They may not know it, but I've already started discipling them. How? I'm not teaching them anything. I'm not giving them a Bible study. That's exactly the point. Discipleship isn't about that, I'm discipling them already because I'm welcoming them into my home. I'm showing them love. I'm showing them kindness. I am living out the rhythms of the kingdom in my relationship with them, and they see it and they catch it, and it starts to rub off on them. Discipleship's already begun. And so by the time that relationship gets to the point where I can open up scripture and say, this is Jesus, that person's already halfway through their discipleship journey, you know? And by the time they receive Jesus, I don't have to teach them anything else. They're ready to go. Go do it. Go and do thou likewise. And this is why the church in Iran is exploding. I mean, one of the reasons it's exploding exponentially in growth, whereas the church in the West, with all of our comfortable buildings and comfortable resources, is shrinking. It's a mindset, right? It's a mindset. And I think for Adventism, we have to get out of this mindset that discipleship is about the exchange of data and the exchange of information. I had this issue, I would say it, when I was pastoring a conservative church that I pastored some years ago. There was a lady who, you know, was upset. She was upset that, after church, people were talking and making friends, and in the church building, they should go outside. This is a sacred ground. Anyways, that's horrible theology, but I won't go into that now. And I remember saying to her, if truth is an idea, then you are justified in saying, look, here's the truth. Let me shove it down your throat and now get out of here. Right? Of course you are. If truth is a data point, if it's a propositional idea, then shove it down people's throats all you want. Put it on flyers, stick it in people's letterboxes, stick it on their windshield wipers, harass them to get the truth out there. But if truth is a person, how do you get to know a person? Right? You don't get to know a person by shoving a person down someone else's throat. It doesn't work. It never has a relationship ever blossomed that way, right? You get to know a person by spending time together, by sharing life together, by sharing space together. And I said to her, Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth. You know what that means? That means the truth is a person. It's not a propositional idea that you just slap people with. It's a person. How do you get to know a person? And to her credit, because this lady was very conservative, to her credit, she sat there and thought about it, and she said, we need to be making more relationships. We need to be loving people and making them feel more welcome. I was like, absolutely. And she completely dropped her whole complaint, to her credit. But most people never really do. Most people just find some way to wiggle out of it and keep their, their traditions alive. But this is it, man. Like, discipleship is about walking with the master. It's about a relationship. It's not about propositional data just being indoctrinated and downloaded into your cranium. It's about learning to walk with Jesus, catch the rhythms of Jesus, love spending time with Jesus, get together to pray, and actually pray for, even Adventist prayer meetings aren't prayer meetings, bro. Like, how many prayer meetings I've been to? We pray for 5 minutes at the end, and we spend the rest of the time reading an Ellen White book. It's like, no, like let's worship. Let's be in His presence. Anyways, yeah. So this is the final layer of our discipleship. Our youth ministry frame that is busted is rationalistic. We think so long as we're downloading doctrinal information into our young people's brains, then they're becoming disciples of Jesus. No, they're not. They're becoming religiously informed and intelligent people. But discipleship is about life on life. And you can't get away from that. So we need to get back to that, bro.
We need to, man. We need, like you said, if it was just the exchange of information, you don't really need the Holy Spirit for that.
That's right.
Any human can just exchange information. I mean, you have universities who are studying the Bible and offer courses, but they don't have the experience. They don't care about the spiritual experience. They don't believe in it anyway, for starters. Yeah. And
dude, Bart Ehrman.
What's that?
You ever heard of Bart? You ever heard of Bart Ehrman?
Bart Ehrman. No. Tell me.
Bart Ehrman. He's a New Testament scholar, like an amazing New Testament scholar. He's an atheist.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
He doesn't believe any of it. He's a great New Testament scholar, bro. He understands the culture, the context, the nuances. Like, he's brilliant. He's an atheist,
And we've equated that to being spiritual. But it's crazy because we say, well, he doesn't believe, but we do believe. But I mean, we don't. Some of us don't even it's crazy that the Laodicean church does not recognize the presence of Jesus. yet they have all the information. But he's not in there, right? Because he's knocking at the door, which means he's outside. So you have a church full of the knowledge. They think they don't need anything. They think they have the money, they have the programs, they have events, but Jesus is not even there. Like they don't notice him that he's not there. They think he's there because apparently they've equated that interchange of knowledge to being spiritual. And yeah, bro, you said a cost. We need to start teaching our young people that to be part of a Christian means that we're going to have to bear a cross. Like there's a cost. We have to carry a cross, bro. In the West, we don't want to know anything about carrying crosses, bro. That's the reality. You know, church is cool as long as it doesn't take away my time, doesn't take away from my wallet, doesn't take away from my stuff, then I'm cool with being a Christian. But once you start digging into that stuff, and Jesus is like, wait, you got to count the cost, right? But we can't teach that to youth. And I don't mean carrying the cross either in a legalistic way also, right? Like you got to follow the commandments. I don't mean it in that way. I'm talking about loving Jesus, being in his presence like Mary, bro, being willing to like wash his feet, kiss his feet, man. Like, I know it sounds weird, but bro, I'm sorry if it does. It's literally there. Like this woman was in love with Jesus, bro. And we ourselves are not having those experiences most of the time. That's what our youth need. That's what we need. That's what the church needs in general. And like you said, once you have that healthy spirituality, like the rest comes. There's never been a church that prays so much and doesn't grow, bro, and nothing happens. Like when have you heard that? You know what? This church is praying too much. Like nothing's like that's too much, right? What statistic would that be, bro? Like it's nuts. Like the Holy Spirit comes in the context of prayer, of enjoying, of worship, and I think it's possible though, bro. Like I'm not saying we're all here. Like we're the example. I'm just saying that I've been convinced that, man, when I'm trying to teach my kid as a parent, trying to be that, that priest in my home, not just to exchange information, but to really, man, let's learn to come to the feet of Jesus. But it starts with me, man, even as a pastor. Starts with us, starts with our leaders, starts with everybody. So, but I think it's possible, man. And it's a beautiful thing when it does happen. So, yeah, man, I think this conversation has been awesome.
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. And what we're going to do in the next episode, the next episode is going to be an interview with Alan Martin. And then after that, you and I are going to just wrap up. We're going to take these 4 sort of frames and wrap it up into a nice conclusion, because I want to go from here. The next question that I want to get into is like, okay, I get the frame and I get the need. I get why the frame is busted, but what's the alternative? Number one. And number two, how do I make the alternative real? So we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But yeah, this was really good, man. And look, I talked heavily about rationalism in this episode because that tends to be the predominant side of that frame in Adventist churches. But there are churches that don't do the rationalistic thing. There are churches that go the opposite extreme into what we term emotionalism, right? And these are churches that don't teach any doctrine. They don't teach any theology. It's just like just come and have a great experience and get emotional. And I've been in churches like that, man. And I've been in youth groups like that where, the emotionalism is really intense. And it doesn't lead to lasting discipleship either, because once the emotion wears off, it's like, I just had this spiritual high, and then the spiritual high is gone after a day, and you're back to feeling isolated from God. And so I'm not anti-emotional like some conservative Adventists are. I think emotion is great. I think music that moves you is beautiful. I think it's designed that way. Let it move you. But that's not the key to discipleship, right? Like we need the frame, and we're going to talk about like what the alternative is, but I'll just give a little hint here. We need a spiritual environment where young people are immersed in what God is doing in the world, mind, body, and spirit, fully immersed, fully engaged, whole being with what God is doing in the world. Not just rational, not just emotions, whole being engagement. And we'll talk about that in the next episode. So, all right, man. I'm going to go to the beach.
Bro, lucky you, man. and I'm going to go to sleep, man. And wake up and still not go to the beach either. So that's all good, bro. Hey, man, it's been great, bro. You guys stay safe out there, bro. We'll stay in touch. And everyone, thank you again. Subscribe, like. We're leaving the links, right, bro, to the book and your other book that just came out, by the way. Real quick, people need to get that.
Yeah. Yep, Adventism Plus Volume 1. It's funny because, talk about rationalism. Adventism Plus is a 4-volume set that's all about the 28 fundamentals. So, but again, we're not knocking knowledge.
Of course.
It's just knocking putting it on a pedestal. But what Adventism Plus Volume 1s through 4 does is it explores the 28 fundamental beliefs in light of our meta-modern and present and the emerging post-human world that we're moving into, the rapid technological shifts. How do we articulate the gospel and the message of Adventism in a way that speaks to the anxieties that people are experiencing now and in the next 30 years? Because for the most part, man, we're really out of touch. And so I'm not leading any sort of revolution here in terms of like reframing Adventism. The Holy Spirit's leading that revolution. This is just my little contribution to that wide thing that he's doing, that big thing that he's doing. It's just me putting my toes in the water and saying, here's what I think. So Adventism Plus Volume 1 just came out, Origins. It goes through fundamental beliefs 1 through 7 and explores them in light of the meta-modern post-human shift. So check it out, you guys. storychurchproject.com/books. You'll find it there. You can get it on Amazon as a hardcover, a soft cover, and Kindle. If you are not in America, those buttons lead you straight to the American Amazon. So it might say this product is not available because you're in a different country. That's the only reason why. But it is available in the UK, it's available in Canada, it's available in Australia. You just have to go on your actual country's Amazon and look up the book, and you'll be able to get it. So, all right, that's it.
Good stuff. All right, everyone. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Till next time.